From his first appearance in 1939 to becoming a global icon, Batman has changed a lot. What's up, everyone? My name's Connorville. Welcome back to the channel. Always happy to have you here. And today we are going to explore how the iconic Dark Knight has changed throughout the years. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to decide if it's been for the better or for the worse. But I think we're all going to agree that it's for the better. Batman has been such a crucial figure in a lot of our lives. A lot of us have literally grown up with him. He's one of the few characters in modern history where whether you have no idea who he is, you only watch the movies, you read the comics, but you know who he is. And a large part of that revolves around the fact that he's been able to change so much throughout his history. So let's take a look at how much Batman has changed since he first appeared. Real quickly, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, it means the absolute world to me. But let's just jump into it. 1939 to the 1950s, the golden age of Batman. Batman was first introduced in Detective Comics number 27, 1939, and he was originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Now, you might have heard of these two names before, and that's because there is drama with the two of them. And to sum that up, Bill Finger was the one who originally came up with the concept for Batman, and while the essence was there, it definitely doesn't look like the Batman that we know and love. Bob Kane was the co-creator, and he was the one who came up with the aesthetic, the design, everything that we love about Batman. Bill Finger was the one who came up with the detective superhero aspect. It just looked a little wonky, but the thought was there. But back to his first appearance. Batman was first featured in a story called The Cast of the Chemical Syndicate. The story starts with a man being stabbed to death, and Commissioner Gordon brings in his friend Batman to help solve the case. This story is pretty funny just because Commissioner Gordon is friends with Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And honestly, it's a pretty open and closed story. It involves a murder, someone being framed for the murder, and then Batman finding the actual culprit. It does end with one of the criminals falling into a vat of acid, and the Batman coldly says a fitting end to his kind. Like, this man has been ruthless since day one. But this started what we know as the story of Batman. He was written as a dark vigilante, inspired by pulp heroes and the noir aesthetic. Some of the most important things that were introduced in this era were the Batcave, the Batmobile, and Robin. Only 11 issues later would we be introduced to Robin. And Robin was incredible, but he did usher in a change to a more lighter storytelling to appeal to the younger audiences, which leads us into the Silver Age of Batman, aka the campy era. The Comics Code Authority was established in 1954, and they hurt a lot of things with comics. One of the main things they did involved Batman. They believed that Batman was too dark for children, and so they heavily pushed Batman into a more campy, lighthearted tone. Obviously, we all know the Adam West 1960s Batman, and if you're wondering how Batman comics were at that period, they basically matched the vibe of that show completely. This is where we got people like Batmite, Rainbow Batman. They were battling generic aliens and robots. We got a zebra Batman. I mean, it wasn't good. It's fun to look back on and laugh at it now, but seeing that that was the definitive version of Batman at the time, not great. Now, while the comics took a turn, I mentioned the TV show. While the TV show is definitely not the Batman that you and I know today, it brought a lot of new eyes to the Batman character. Maybe they were getting the wrong idea of him, but the popularity was growing. To this day, his Batman show is considered one of the most famous iterations of any live-action superhero. It even got an animated spin-off a couple years ago. And I'm not gonna lie, it was fun. I had the DVD as a kid. I saw the shark repellent. I know how fun this movie is. The TV show is actually very hard to find online, but I'll save that for another video. This would lead us into the 1970s, and this was when the Dark Knight returned, aka the Bronze Age of Batman. In the 1970s, we got new and younger writers and artists like Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams, and these people introduced the shift back into the darker tones of Batman. It was a reflection on the time. The hippie era was moving out, war was on the rise, the American population was just not happy, and writers wanted to reflect that into their work. This is the era where characters like Ra's al Ghul were introduced. Joker became less of a clown and more of a criminal, giving us some of the best storylines like Death in the Family and The Killing Joke. And it gave us some of my favorite Batman stories like The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One. And I cannot stress enough how amazing these comics are. I go back and I reread them every year. One of the biggest things that these comics did was they redefined Batman as a flawed, complex character who made made mistakes, who had to deal with losing, who had to deal with losing people. He became the poster child for what it means to just keep going. No matter what life threw at him, he would always stand up. And honestly, I think a lot of what we view Batman as today comes from the 1980s. But that leads us to Batman on the big screen. Everything that has been building up for Batman, all of the changes, the more realistic depiction of him, all comes to a head for Tim Burton's The Batman in 1989. For the general audience that had only seen Adam West Batman, this was a big shift. The gothic tone that Michael Keaton brought to the role cannot be understated. In fact, you could argue that every Batman that has been in live action after him is just trying to match his energy. Most of the Batmans that we've seen in live action are trying to follow in Michael Keaton's footsteps other than comic book Batman. But as I said, not many people knew that Batman had become so gritty and dark. One of those people was Joel Schumacher, who wanted to go back to the more fun and campy aspect of Batman that he grew up and loved. That's when we get 1997's Batman and Robin, one of the worst Batman movies to ever exist. It is fun, it does have its moments, the cast is interesting, but oh my god, what a dumb story. When you're watching this movie, you don't know if Joel Schumacher loves Batman or absolutely hates him. Some of the things that they do in this movie, like the Bat credit card, the Bat nipples, it's just all too much. Which is why we didn't get another Batman movie until 2005. Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins movie is absolutely groundbreaking. Christopher Nolan took the flawed, complex character of the 1980s and put it smack dab into live action. Not only did this show people that superhero movies can be good, it showed people that superhero movies are real movies. The Dark Knight trilogy heavily focuses on realism and moral ambiguity. Christian Bale is a one-of-a-kind Batman. He may not really look like the Batman that we love in the comics, but he has played the part better than almost anyone else. The iconic voice that he came up with for the role has been embedded into the Batman mythos now. Swear to me! Obviously, we can't talk about the Dark Knight trilogy without touching on Heath Ledger, an absolute legend in the industry. What he brought to the character of the Joker was absolutely beautiful. Every scene that he's in, he steals the show. He is without a doubt the best thing that came out of this trilogy, and it is such a shame that he was taken from this earth too soon. And thanks to Christopher Nolan's depiction of the Batman, we now will always have a more realistic version of Batman in live action. Ben Affleck definitely had the realism down, but he was put in a more fantastical universe. But Robert Pattinson is basically just the Dark Knight 2.0. Let's get more gritty, let's get more real. And even though I kind of hate that business practice, by God, the Batman is probably the best Batman movie of all time. The soundtrack, the cinematography, the coloring, the Batsuit, the villains, the Batmobile, it is just perfect. Literally, it is perfect. I hate it because I want a more fantastical universe, but it is so good. I don't know why it's taking like 5 years to get the Batman 2. Like, I need that right now. Batman is by far one of the biggest heroes to ever hit the live action screens, but it cannot be understated just how much of an impact he's had in the animated world as well. Batman the Animated Series from 1992 is one of the best, if not the best, animated superhero shows of all time. I mentioned earlier that when you think of your version of the Batman, it's probably more aligned to what he was like in the 1980s, but this show slams that. Kevin Conroy as Batman was one of the best choices Warner Brothers has ever done, and he was so good in the Batman animated series, he did so many more iterations of Batman. I can't even name them all. Justice League Unlimited, Batman the Animated Series, Static Shock, so many Justice League animated movies, and so much more. Most people look at Kevin Conroy and Batman the Animated Series as the definitive version of Batman. When you read Batman comics, you're hearing his voice. When you think of who Batman is, he's popping up. And it cannot be understated that we also got Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill to voice the Joker. Just like Kevin Conroy, he is the definitive version of the Joker. When you're reading comics, when you're thinking about Joker, he's the one you're thinking of. But we've gotten so many projects with Batman, like the Lego Batman movie, Batman Beyond. And not to mention, he has one thing that that almost, if not no other superhero has, and that's a trilogy of games. And obviously Batman has over hundreds of games throughout his years, but the Arkham trilogy is considered the Batman games. And not only is it considered the Batman games, it is considered the standard for a good superhero game. And it makes total sense. When you bring back Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill to a project, you're already scoring in 100. I want to really point out that the things that the Arkham games brought to the gaming industry completely revolutionized it. The way its combat is done, the way its story is done, it changed the video game industry forever. Through every era, Batman has remained a symbol of resilience, justice, and the enduring fight against darkness. His evolution reflects not just the changing times, but our own enduring fascination with the Caped Crusader. Whether you've read the comics, watched the movies, dressed like Batman, have ever done the Christian Bale voice, have ever asked why so serious, we all know that Batman has a special place in our hearts. For me personally, I can't picture a time in my life without him, and I'm always excited for upcoming Batman projects. He is arguably the most well-known and beloved superhero of all time. He has some of the most popular supervillains, the best superhero movies, and continues to be a leading role in the superhero world. Which version of Batman is your favorite though? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into your favorite superheroes. I've been Connorville. Thank you so much for watching with me. And until next time. Why did you say that name? Why did you say that name?